All of a sudden, I am seeing this everywhere. On the Mississippi River a couple weeks ago, my brother was flipping this finesse stick bait into weeds and brush and catching fish with what we would call traditional flipping or pitching terminal tackle. It looked so out of proportion. Well, we've Texas rigged full-size stick baits a lot, but this looks different. Then I literally started seeing this same thing all over social media like Instagram. I honestly have not done this, so I wanted to observe it underwater and find out, is there a difference between what I would consider proportional terminal tackle or lighter hooks and weights for a finesse stick bait, and then what a lot of anglers are using, and that is more traditional flipping and pitching sized terminal tackle with tiny finesse stick baits, or using what we could call oversized gear. Well, the first setup on this finesse lure is a 3/16 ounce lead worm weight and a 1/0 offset worm hook, what I would consider proportional for the lure. In other words, it's definitely not too big. Well, I messed around with it a little yesterday on the water, and it casts extremely well on bait cast equipment. And for me, at least, if I'm going to do more target-oriented fishing, I personally am much more accurate with bait cast gear, and it worked great. And I did catch some tiny bass pretty quick. Now, the first thing to notice is that with these very small baits, if the rigging is off just the slightest bit, it will spin, especially when reeling it back, which could cause some awful line twists. So if you want that nice drop through cover on the fall, really spend some time and make sure it is straight as you can get it. The tiny plastic is much more susceptible to differences in rigging than a larger plastic that has more resistance to it. Now, this little bait kind of works up and over sticks really nice, and when dragging on the bottom, of course, it looked great. Very similar to what we would expect from our traditional Ned rigs, but the weedless aspect in wood and vegetation is nice. Now, let's rig this up with what I have been seeing and hearing people talk about. This is now a little bigger offset hook. It's a 2/0 and a 1/2 ounce tungsten weight. I went with tungsten here because I wanted to keep this as compact as possible instead of the larger profile of a 1/2 ounce lead worm weight. Now, the fall, as you would expect, is lightning fast. It could be very effective for getting that initial reaction bite when dropped in and around cover, and this heavier weight, like my brother was using, also punches vegetation nicely. But here is where the real difference came when I was watching this. This small plastic lure as opposed to a larger profile lure, when paired with a bigger weight, is very erratic. Instead of gliding or slipping over branches, it has a definite pop or dart when worked in this small piece of brush. And then when dragged along the bottom, the same thing happens. It presents a much more erratic presentation than the lighter weight. And like I mentioned, I believe the very small profile of the plastic accentuates this. A heavier weight would do this with a bigger soft plastic lure, but the tiny finesse stick bait makes it more obvious. And keep in mind, I'm not popping the rod. I'm literally dragging the lure with the rod on a side sweep. When the heavier weight grabs something, it pops free and continues on its way. It's a very different look than a steady glide or scoot along the bottom that we get with a lighter weight or even a Ned rig. I'm super interested to hear if you have tried this and what type of results you have had fishing a Texas rigged finesse stick bait with traditional sized flipping or pitching terminal tackle. And hey, if you want to watch a video that goes into when is it time to switch colors when we're out there on the water, go ahead and check this one out right here, and make sure that you go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.